Okay, Friday, 31st of May, 2024. So Bitcoin fixes this, but what exactly? So among a handful of things that Bitcoin fixes, ultimately it fixes, we can say, affects, changes, augments human incentive, human action, praxeology, what humans do and why. If we follow the logic thoroughly enough, people would say that Bitcoin disincentivizes war and incentivizes peace. Case in point, because, again, first principles, because Bitcoin is immutable and censorship resistant, means that transactions only go one way. You can't do what's called for example, what's it called again? Oh dear. Reverse transfer, chargeback. In the bank, a chargeback. Go to a central authority and ask them to reverse a transaction. You get your money back, whether through debit or credit card. Okay. What that means is on the Bitcoin blockchain, any transaction, you have to persuade the other person to return it back to you. Censorship resistance, and it's immutable. You can't change it. Someone else can. Just return it back to you. So that means then that suddenly human relations in terms of transactions changes completely, meaning that vendors have to provide more trust signals and higher value, persuading people to part with their Bitcoin, because the second point I want to mention is that increases in price or increases in value, deflationary. So the product the vendors are selling has to be worth more than the future price of the product or the money, the Bitcoin that the person has. And because refunds have to be done on a person-by-person basis as opposed to a centralized authority, like with the banks, the vendor has to provide enough trust signals, social proof, or institutional trust, being part of organizations that show trustworthiness. They have to do those kind of things to persuade the buyer to part with their cash, meaning trust levels will increase, meaning human incentive will change, meaning, well, as a result of the immutability of the ledger, money only goes one way. No central authority to ask for a refund, chargeback. Other big thing that it fixes, and worth understanding again, first principles, is the 21 million. We now have a money that's got a fixed supply. There's also mobile, so we can go anywhere in the world, and very divisible, meaning we can send almost any amount of Bitcoin, no matter how small it is, around the world. So these first principles help give it more sound money properties. So an ideal form of money or currency, probably money, that allows people to save, that is deflationary, that goes up in purchasing power over time. There's a great meme in the space. Everything divided by 21 million, and that day is celebrated on the 21st of August, meaning the whole world, everything, will only be divided by 21 million Bitcoin. But yet more houses, more people, more books, more clothes, more products, more desks, more chairs can be made. An infinite number, in theory, of these things could be created. More windows, more tires, more trees, paper, you name it, more books, anything, more plastic, more coins, more pens. But there'll only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. Now that means that it's deflationary in nature, meaning over time, one Bitcoin will buy you more and more things. Okay? Therefore, people are not going to be having, say, fiat money and needing to invest it in something sporadically or give it to someone in order to maintain their purchasing power, i.e. beat inflation. But just by holding this, it increases in purchasing power over time. They don't need to learn investing. They don't need to worry about that. The money will do what it's designed to do, increase in value, increase in purchasing power, which means that people don't need to be gambling. People don't, by all means, that still will exist. It's part of human nature, quick wins, but they don't need to invest in stock markets. They don't need to look at active or passive investing or indexing or DCAing or understanding different kinds of bonds, perpetual bonds versus ladder bonds, all these kind of aspects. They won't need to do that. because the money they have is doing what it's supposed to do, increasing purchasing power, deflationary, and that means that they have more free time to focus on their skills, focus on their career, focus on their business, focus on their life. Why worry about investing when the money itself that you're holding is increasing in purchasing power over the long term? So it fixes the idea that human incentives with regards to transactions, now we're going to need more trust signals when we transact, and there's going to be higher value products in order to persuade people to part with their Bitcoin. And we aren't going to need to spend time dedicating our lives to investing when the money itself is increasing purchasing power. Now, as I said earlier, Bitcoin disincentivizes war and incentivizes peace, because as Bitcoin, first principles, is censorship resistant, that means then that the way to take someone's Bitcoin, of course through force, a $5 wrench attack, but will be through persuasion, because you can't freeze people's wallets, Bitcoin wallets, like how a bank account can be frozen today. Case in point, back in end of February 2022, the US Central Bank, the Fed, they took a lot of Russian assets. End of February or early March 2022. And that showed that if it can happen to these big sovereign countries, it can happen to anyone. Any person, any company, any group, any organization, any charity, you name it. The principle has been set. The precedent has been set. Any cash can be taken, it can be frozen. But because you can't do anything with my wallet, my cold wallet, or paper wallet, or mind wallet, I can spend that money and put it anywhere I want. I can send it anywhere I want. And the network, first principles, is going to allow that transaction to happen, which means now, if you want to get at my wealth, you have to persuade me. Now, of course, violence is going to exist inherently. It's part of human nature. Aggression, violence, psychopaths, that's inherent in the DNA. That's inherent in humans. We can't change that. But we can minimize it, we can curb it, we can disincentivize it. Why? If you want someone's Bitcoin, you have to persuade them. More trust signals, which means that the point of war, this is where it gets interesting. The point of war would decrease because it would be more about persuading someone to part with their Bitcoin, especially if that Bitcoin is on a piece of paper, in their mind, wherever else. Now, of course, violence will still exist. People can still force it out of you, but they're disincentivized to, because the nature of the technology itself. And it's also worth understanding that, we can focus on our talents. No need to learn investing. It will go up in price itself. So Bitcoin fixes a lot of human incentives with regards to sound money, deflationary, and changing human behavior. Incentivizes trade and cooperation, because that's what it's built around, the whole thing, peer-to-peer cash. But Bitcoin fixes these things among a whole myriad of other stuff. You could look at almost anything, and if you squint, if you look hard enough, Bitcoin fixes this in some way, in some second order consequence way, or in some remote but logically consistent way. Bitcoin fixes it. And it affects humans fundamentally, human action, human behavior, and that has a cascading knock-on effect, second order consequence on everything around us. So, for example, back in October 2021, I was going to climb up a mountain in the Lake District in England, North England, and I needed a hat for the mountain. Fair enough. And it was £5, I remember. And I thought to myself, well, what's more valuable to me right now, October 2021, and into the future? This £5 note in cash or this hat? Now, materially speaking, I can earn the £5 back again. That's not a problem. I can get it back, no issues. But it's more a question of what's more useful to me right here, right now, in the foot of the mountain. This £5 note or this hat? I bought the hat. Okay. And that meant that at that moment and into the future, that hat was more valuable to me than the £5 note. Which means that in the future, businesses will be incentivized to ensure their products are much higher value that the vendors, the buyers, are going to get more out of their product than the potential future price of Bitcoin, the current or the potential future price. For example, that £5 I spent in October 2021, 2.5 odd years later, yeah, that hat will be, say, £10. That's good. That was a good trade, because that hat gave me more value and more usefulness, because I used it loads of times on other mountains as well, as opposed to just that one, than the potential £5, or now let's say £10, that would give me today. Powerful stuff. So people then, it's almost the opposite. It's the opposite of shrinkflation, really. When the quality of products goes down, but the price stays the same, but the quality gets poorer and poorer. It's the opposite of that. And I don't know what that word would even be. Deflation. So, I don't know, an improvementary? Getting better? Deflationary. So, I don't know what the word for that would be even. Just incremental improvements, if anything, but that's not very catchy. Yeah, but yeah, it makes sense. Because the future value is going to be up here, so therefore, I'd be, as a vendor, I'd be incentivized to give them a damn good deal. Yeah. And also that, I think, would be a second order consequence of being and going onto a Bitcoin standard. But that's a whole other conversation. I did a video about this a few days ago, a week or something ago. But yeah. But otherwise, you will see me tomorrow.